Welcome to Realm IQ Sessions, featuring conversations on AI with AI founders, AI leaders, and experts from around the globe, covering the intersection of media, technology, Hollywood, and marketing. Please give us a follow or subscribe. This is our host, Kurt Doty.
Welcome, everybody. Let's get into it. We are well into our season 3, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, and that is Andy Beach. He's a technology strategist, advisor, and author specializing in the intersection of AI, media, and digital transformation. As the former CTO of Media and Entertainment at Microsoft, kind of a big name, kind of a big deal, he led innovations in cloud production, AI-driven workflows, and content archives, helping studios, sports leagues, and media companies navigate technological disruption, certainly which we are in with AI. So, Andy, so glad to have you on the show and welcome. How you doing?
Good, Kurt. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, being a veteran at Microsoft, that's probably a whole other podcast, but I love the work that you were doing there. And I did have dealings with Microsoft when I was at Universal Studios when we were trying to launch HD DVD, and Microsoft was technology behind it, and worked with Mark Turner, and who's been a guest on the show as well. And so tell me what's new for you and what's going on with AI in your world.
Well, first of all, I think just going back to the Microsoft piece, I'm glad you even knew they had a media team, because there are many people I talked to who were always surprised that, we didn't know Microsoft did media, and it really had a rich legacy well before I was there of being in that space and inventing things like the VC1 codec and doing work around adaptive streaming, which is actually how I met them when I was in the startup world. So nice to hear that they are at least remembered for working in that space. It's been fun transitioning out of it. To be honest, it's been nice to step away from sort of a global remit and just work on the areas that I'm most interested in. And gosh, AI and the intersection of AI and media right now couldn't be a bigger area to sink your teeth into. So a lot of what I've been doing and a lot of what I've been writing about are really just my thoughts around where we are going in a variety of different parts of the industry. It's not just for content creation or for production. It's for monetization and distribution and supply chain management. And it's even for the viewers who are consuming the content on the other side of the application of the TV.
Yeah, they actually don't realize now that they're interacting with AI and various interfaces now that it's ubiquitously integrated into the platforms that we already use, like Alexa, right?
Right. And, I think that's funny. I think everybody became hyper aware of AI when generative AI came around. I think the drop of GPT and Claude and all of these other models suddenly made us hyper aware of what AI was capable of doing. But it also meant that people were highly unaware of where they were already using machine learning or some more simple versions of AI and interacting with it on the regular basis. I mean, if you've had even rudimentary recommendations in your Netflix queue, that is ultimately being powered by some level of machine learning.
Right.
And we're just taking it for granted. Similarly, anytime we see a transcript of something or closed captions that were generated automatically, like we're just consuming it and interacting with it. We're just not thinking of it. But I think that Band-Aid ripping off moment of, oh my God, these things can write and sound like me, was both scared everybody and led to the further implications of it can do so much more suddenly, potentially.
Yeah, I look at it as empowering, but not everyone looks at it that way. And, there's a lot of copyright issues and the latest kind of Miyazaki thing that just happened. It's like, I can't believe that. So yeah, just about that, Miyazaki and him being ripped off. And he had a very clear view, a negative view on AI, speaking to it like it's the end of creativity. So yet they scraped him and everyone's now a Miyazaki artist, animator, storyteller. just in the last few days. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is amazing how these come up, and I think this is one of those areas where it is good that we're still approaching it cautiously. Like I am very much a tech optimist when I look at it and I see the implications of in the positive way of where it can go. But I fully recognize that there is opportunities to use AI for bad or to weaponize it. And those are the pitfalls that we have to look out for. And it's part of the education process of understanding how the models get trained and where the data came from that is training it, and making sure that we have rights for that, much as we think of rights for distribution or licensing of content. There has to be some level of that agreement in place. And unfortunately, because this is so new, not everybody completely understands how this works. And so sometimes I think even when someone is licensing their data, particularly in the early days of this, they may not have been aware of the implications of it. Now, clearly Miyazaki wasn't even approached about it. And I know there are a lot of authors that are starting to realize that their works were bundled into some of the llama data that Meta used as well. And so this is an area where we have to really buckle down and get better implementations around how authors and artists and creatives can agree for their content to get used in the training and have some level of remuneration that comes back out of that, or some level of attribution.
Yeah, certainly. What's ironic is that as billions are being poured into, not only the big tech players in AI, but also the startups, it seems like, can't you just cordon off a portion of those billions of dollars and put that into licensing fees? If things can be solved with money, there's no shortage of money as it relates to the investment into these companies. But yet Sam Altman, is pressing our current administration to just like, hey, it's fair use and kind of write it into law so I don't have to deal with these lawsuits. Isn't that crazy?
It will take positive policy input in order to get us to a place where it is. I will happily say I am not a lawyer and I probably can't make comments on what is fair use or not. Personally, I don't think we're into a fair use territory by any stretch of the way that it's been defined in the past. So I do believe that it ultimately will take sort of business and government agreeing on how some of this moves forward. But candidly, I think the EU and the European Broadcasting Union are farther ahead in thinking about these implications than the US are. So this is likely a place where we will be following. We will not be leading on getting the right policies in place.
Yeah, I have no faith in our government and regulation in this area currently. So, I think it's up to the states, which I think is interesting. Certainly in California, Gavin Newsom has created a bunch of laws to help companies guide the development, which is good. And I think other states are following. But it's also up to the individuals as we have what I call choices and voices. We have choices to make in terms of what platforms we could and should use in terms of, are they ethically sourced? Are they using AI ethically? Do they have guardrails built in internally from their manifesto to their mission to their software? And then using our voices and speaking up and speaking to our local legislators, either in city government, state government, or state senators and Congress people. We do have the power to write and advocate, and I believe that is what we need to be doing. We can't just sit back, I believe, and just kind of let everything roll over us in this time of lawlessness, so to speak.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think it is a point in time where we have to be active in how we feel about it and make that known. But at the same time, I would say to those who particularly are feeling more negative about it, it's not a time to just stop engaging with AI technology and ignoring it, because then you're going to have even less say in how it gets deployed and implemented than if you stay the course and find a way. Ultimately, I think it is here for better or worse. And if we want to have it be a positive impact to the way we work in media and consume media, it's on us to engage to help solve the problems.
Yeah, kind of like the typewriter, right?
Yeah.
That didn't go away.
Right.
And actually, IBM, they made typewriters before they made computers. So, all these companies are evolving with the technology. And you're right that we can't give up on using it. And that's a discussion I want to have is around the tech bubble. I believe that, a tech bubble is like, when is the AI bubble going to burst? Well, it kind of burst with DeepSeek. And that tech bubble is based on valuations of these companies, which has nothing to do with what I call the other bubble, was the AI adoption bubble. People who use and embrace and are thriving by using this software, regardless of what company is building it. There's many to choose from. We all have choices, but no one's going to take away that hunger and desire for people to play with this and integrate it into their workflows and businesses and creativity. And I don't see that bubble bursting anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't see the adoption slowing down anytime soon. In fact, I feel like we're really just getting to adoption. We're still playing with AI in many places and in the workflows as sort of a new loop in the work we do. It's we have a workflow and then we sort of pause it to go out to and interact with the model, and then we come back to our workflow. And slowly what we are seeing is the collapse of that, a merger of these out of band passes where AI is now starting to become available either in the applications, or there's all new solutions that are coming around that integrate that creative workflow and the AI more together. That part is just beginning. I do agree sort of what DeepSeek ultimately showed us was that we'd all gotten comfortable thinking that there was sort of a way that the training and the building of these large language models went, and it was X amount of hours and X millions of dollars, or X months, I should say, X months or X years, and a significant amount of money. And to see that turned over so rapidly is really just indicative of how rapid the innovations in AI have come. I think in more traditional non-AI related realms of innovation that we've seen in media, particularly, I think back to like cloud adoption and things like adaptive bitrate streaming, like all of those things played out over the course of several years. And in some cases, like, a decade or more of time. And so the evolution felt more natural because the adoption was a slower process and the evolution was a slower process. Things happen so rapidly in AI innovation that as soon as we think we know what we're doing with it, 6 months later, there's some entire new way that is twice as efficient as what we were doing that is suddenly there. And so we're not done with that sort of innovation bubble, I would say. There are going to be radical advances that jump forward as we find ways to be more efficient, either with the training side of it or with the implementation side of it for several more years. And all that's really going to begin slowing that down, it will be, hitting up against thresholds of either latency and reaction times for the data that we're getting back and forth from the models, or in the compute power that's there. But even that might change as things like quantum computing become a reality. Still very much a science experiment and early commercial test by all of the clouds. But as those elements evolve, AI will play a heavy role in that as well.
Seems like it's got to get cheaper and more efficient because that's what normally happens, right?
Yep.
So speaking of DeepSeek in China, how are we doing in that AI race or AI war with China?
I mean, that is a great question. And it is certainly different philosophies for how the work gets done. I don't know if I personally classify it as a war, maybe more of a race in how that innovation works. And I would say what we have seen is from them is a way to do things more efficiently that simply hadn't been explored here because we had access to more hardware and resources to do the early implementation. So what will be interesting is to see if there are, what are the validation steps to go with the training that goes there. And if we can get to a place where there is more global agreements around how we track things like the provenance of what goes in and what comes out of AI models, that will begin helping, I think, allow us to sort of better compare sort of both the quality of what we are seeing come out, but also the quality of the data that was used in the process of creating whatever the output is, which is going to be super important as we get closer or further along with this. And I think it's going to become a big contention point around things like the copyright and trademarks that can be put against all of this.
Yeah, the internet was supposed to bring the world together, right? And I think provenance and governance and copyright and DRM, these are all difficult things to think about globally as our country is trying to, I don't know, be less globalist. It just seems very challenging, right?
Well, there's always, I mean, there are sort of utopian views of this is how everything could work. And then there's realities of business that invariably throw wrenches into it. And so I think it's finding that balance between the two so that we get the efficiencies that we want and that people on all sides are treated fairly. It cannot be I think it's hard to have the equality in a capitalist only view of what we're looking for. It has to be more balanced.
Yeah, you mentioned utopia, something that's not talked about. I'm kind of a solar punk guy and, hoping that AI enables a solar punk future versus the dystopian T2 narrative, which we all know so well.
Yeah, it's funny how much we come back to Skynet when we talk about AI.
Yeah.
I think we just inherently have been trained by entertainment to think of AI as the bad guy, which doesn't help as we try to find a balance for how we move our future forward, where we enable it and it becomes an assistant and a partner of ours in our daily lives.
Speaking of Hollywood, so you did a lot of integrations with Hollywood and Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think Hollywood has certainly been slow to adopt. Yeah, they had union issues, they had IP theft issues, copyright issues. So for all those, what are noble causes, I think Hollywood is behind the times as the world has moved on and embraced the use of these tools, the software, these companions, right? But I think the thaw is happening and there is movement towards adoption and at the studio level and awareness of it in the Oscar race, which ultimately didn't become an issue or a disqualifying aspect.
Which I was slightly surprised, but pleasantly surprised that it wasn't a bigger issue.
Yeah. So again, it just reinforces the fact that in the right hands of the filmmaking community, these are just tools that seasoned pros, veterans in the industry are just going to use. Right. And their jobs aren't getting replaced. They're just getting more efficient. And who doesn't want to be efficient? Who doesn't want to save money on their movie production budget, both on the producer side as well as the studio side? But what are some of the signs you're seeing in discussions with the Hollywood players?
Yeah, so I think there's always a little bit of misconception because, and again, I'll go back to sort of generative AI's launch being sort of this trigger point. There was tons of AI use that's been going on for years, a decade or more in in Hollywood around using AI in areas of both production and how they manage archives. When you're dealing with that level of content at scale, you're going to need some level of computer assistance in the work that you're doing. But they of course got worried, and there were lots of, early problems around things like provenance and IP issues. So they rightly sort of slowed adoption down and held things in place. What I do think is telling is that we're starting to see media companies and studios in particular have effectively like an AI governance board, whether they call it that or not. Some literally call it that. Others have different names for it, whether it's their Office of Innovation or other areas, or maybe just part of like a CTO's office. And what they're really doing is looking at the overall implications. People sort of from all the different walks of the business. I mean, HR, legal, production, R&D, and all being able to look at, what are the areas where they really want to advance AI and use it? And then looking as a group at what those implications are. Are there threats within that? Are there safe ways to go implement it? And then the super important one that I feel like gets left out a lot is, how do you go educate the workforce? How do you show them how to use this? And sort of maybe, and most importantly, how not to use it? Like, what are the ways that are going to steer us into the wrong and the bad troubles? And what are the golden path? What is the way to use it that helps everybody be efficient, but still, checks the boxes that business as a studio needs around protecting their IP and all the other pieces that go into it. So I feel like that has started to happen. And of course, that takes a while to set up and get running, but there are studios that are starting to do that, and they're running pilots to test out ideas and then beginning to ship those into production. It's very different, obviously, in an independent world where you have less of that oversight and overhead. And so you see movement quicker there. And there are even other industries where I feel like studios can pay attention and look at the work they're doing and learn mistakes that they might make along the way. Advertising in particular, I feel like, has been pretty quick to AI adoption because they have so many less concerns around things like union with it. I think because they're working directly with brands that have IP, that's where the concerns might be. But I think they're being more bullish about rolling it out in production and testing with it. So it gives you a couple of different places if you're in a studio environment that you can go learn and look and explore. And that's been what they've done for the last couple of years. And hopefully the ones that are now moving into those larger tests around how they're going to use this will have some success and start rolling it out. I think the biggest part, though, for them to remember as they do that is that, again, like I said earlier, AI is going to be changing so rapidly that those implementations are probably going to change just as rapidly. And what you can do with AI today in a production environment will either change in 6 months to a year, or it'll be radically cheaper because the compute got so much more efficient in the way that it goes. So it's a continual iterative process for the next several years.
Yeah. What's done today will look quaint tomorrow.
It'll be adorable. Absolutely.
Oh, that was so cute.
but if you think about it, and again, like if you just think of the time scale now being so much more compressed, but if we think about like the innovations that went around things like cameras and nonlinear editors in the like 90s and 2000s. I mean, when I was in school for film and video in the early 90s, like the lowest quality camera you would ever think about shooting something in was like a $250,000 or $300,000 camera that had probably another $150,000 to $300,000 worth of lenses on the front of it. And even that wasn't going to be a film quality thing. That was just your broadcast productions that were going on. And you jump ahead 10 years and you've now got nonlinear editing tools that you can run on consumer grade equipment. And you've got
your phone.
the smartphone was probably still another half a decade away at that point, but
I mean, you
had the red cameras by then, and they were like a I think at that point it was like a $15,000 device. So, I mean, it was order of magnitudes cheaper, which meant a lot more people were getting into that space and doing it in a way that they couldn't before. Or you saw a lot of people who, had to go either work for a big studio or a big agency that could afford the hardware and the equipment, and they could go off now and do it on their own.
Right.
We're going to see the same kinds of things with AI where it gets prohibitively cheaper, or it gets much less expensive as we move forward with it. And it ultimately democratizes the ability to go out and do these works. And again, that it's dependent on us making sure that we do it with ethical models and in a way that makes sure that everybody feels protected and safe in the way that we're using it.
Let's take a break. Vizsla is a great AI tool. I use it every day. It is the faster, easier, and better way to record your screens and make content. Get a discount by entering Kurt15. Go to vizsla.us or scan the QR code. Speechify is a really cool app. It is an AI voice generator. It does AI voice dubbing and AI voice cloning. Go to speechify.com or scan the QR code. Strikingly is the most loved website and e-commerce builder by entrepreneurs. It is easy to use, and they have launched 12 plus million websites and online stores and counting. Go to strikingly.com or scan the QR code.
Yeah, back to the Madison Avenue aspect of industries that are benefiting and moving forward at a rapid pace. I do believe, because of the state of AI and video, which has mainly been short clips, kind of non-linear, non-sequitur type of fantastic product promotion, right? It doesn't bear the burden of a Hollywood narrative, right? Where you have an actor and scene consistency and continuity. It's like all those issues kind of disappear with Madison Avenue, because they're just like, hey, in 30 seconds, we just want to titillate you with a new shoe from Nike or a juicy hamburger from Wendy's or whatever. All these things are possible with AI. And it is causing disruption and kind of reorganization and rethinking. And you're seeing kind of the big conglomerates kind of shed some of their creative agencies, either out of anticipation of that market collapsing, or they don't want to be in that creative agency business anymore. And there's a lot of growing concern, as you know, from the visual effects side. Companies are going under, Technicolor, Jellyfish, among others. And, those are going under. Where does that leave creative agencies? I came up through the ranks of production in a branding agency world. Wasn't exactly advertising. And, we were kind of the lark in that world, but we were doing really cool shit by integrating typography with live action videos back in the early 90s when, kind of broadcast design was just starting. But, it was the birth of motion design, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of motion designers, a lot of production companies that have been serving the ad industry and the TV industry. They're all freaking out and or re-gearing and retraining. But a lot of disruption, a lot of fear. Where do you see those types of businesses landing in a couple of years?
So I think a thing we hear commonly, and I do believe it is true, is that AI won't replace you, but a person using AI will. And I think that bears out in a couple of different ways. The quality of output you get if you're classically trained and understand all of the elements that you're talking about, what you can then go do with an AI model is going to be far superior to what me or somebody off the street is going to do. So I think that is a given.
I always use the analogy of a guy in a basement in Pacoima.
Yeah, absolutely. But you will suddenly potentially be competing in a broader field. There will be more people who can do what you're doing. And therefore it's my hope that you can stand out in doing that because you know, again, both the software, the aesthetics, you have that sort of that language of motion graphics that you know, and an understanding of the AI that goes into it. So I think there is a certain level of retraining that goes on as part of what you're doing. That said, again, when I was in school, there simply wasn't anything around compression or encoding or live streaming. And that was stuff that I had to learn on the jobs multiple times over many, many years as we move forward. So I feel like I believe this is probably true in all industries, but I know it is definitely true within media, is that you're really never done learning.
Right.
And AI is the new thing that we are learning, and learning how we as an individual need to use it to move ourselves forward with what we're doing. And I think that is what we're seeing, that we will see more of, is that people will feel threatened by it because now suddenly more people are in the pool for what they can do. But knowing how to use it will arm you and make you a more effective and more hireable asset coming out of that, I hope.
Right. To me, it's like it's a new level set. Right?
Yeah.
You talk about democratization, which implies access. But then on the creative side, if there's a new level set, then if everyone knows it, then it will be the people who are using it creatively to take it to the next level. They will stand out. And that's where creativity wins again, and is not crushed by AI, but is empowered.
Right.
So it's I do believe it's an interesting time, but there is this disruption that's going to happen. People need to learn. Maybe there's some shrinkage in terms of some of these agency sizes. Certainly, if you're managing campaigns, let alone just, doing the creative, a lot of that stuff is streamlined. So,
Yeah.
I think social media agencies and social media teams are going to be devastated if they aren't already.
But I would argue that maybe but let's take the sort of the branding scenario. There are companies that never would have worked in that world because it was simply too expensive for them to approach it, because it had to be done through an agency. It involved X amount of people and was effort. In a world where the tools have been more democratized and they're more sort of consumer level, and I can go access pieces of it myself online, there is now a broader audience of companies out there that will potentially go work with a smaller agency on a branding exercise that, again, never would have done that before because it was simply out of their reach. Again, much like there were, we have an entire industry of people who make their living off of like a YouTube channel now. And that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. The infrastructure and the tool sets simply weren't there. And so 20 years ago, could you have imagined saying that there's going to be a world where an independent producer is potentially making a living off of just putting their stuff online for people to go find, and then be either advertised against, sponsored against, or simply pay for access? So I think we're in that same place with AI. I just keep coming back to that of historical examples of, we don't 100% know how it's going to work, but the model is going to be different moving forward as well. We will find patterns that work, and we will have to teach ourselves the things that we need to do it, but we will have to look for the new opportunities that don't maybe fit the old business model that we're using either.
Yeah. So I know you had a lot of experience with the movie studios, sports leagues.
Mm-hmm.
What about the music industry?
Yeah, little bits here and there, mostly probably earlier days of my career working with studios around how they manage the sort of both finished assets and the music videos in particular. I even did work with Vivo years back, which I think of as basically the replacement for MTV. When MTV became more about reality shows and less about music videos, Vivo suddenly appeared. And now I think even that's sort of been replaced somewhat just by YouTube.
Yes.
As a place. But I think they're very sensitive about AI, much in the same way the studios are. They're very concerned about obviously not only the sort of the visual IP, but like the songs themselves, the voices of the artists, and how that approaches. So that I think they're doing the same process the studios are, which is fairly rigorous around, we may go explore particular areas, but we're going to move slowly as we approach it, because we want to make sure that both our intellectual property and ultimately the artists we represent are covered and secured in any plans that we make. I think the area they are moving forward on quicker is around things like production and virtual production, because that's dramatically decreasing the cost that it takes to do a music video shoot, which means that they can now take on more of them. Whereas they may have only had, they have a fixed budget for how much they can spend. And as that price goes down, they can potentially go do more with the same artists, or bring in a wider range of artists they never would have produced a music video for, and take advantage of it. I do think they're also looking at things like live events online differently, and how they can make those more interactive and more engaging. And that's a lesson they're sort of learning from sports leagues, who have had a super fan-centric approach to how they use the data they're collecting to drive an interactive experience. And as sports leagues sort of take back the production control themselves from people they've licensed it to globally, they can reshape the experience of what it's like to consume sports. And I think live entertainment and concerts are looking at similar things.
Well, you speak about different areas of the music industry. What about the estates of deceased musical stars, rap artists, Elvis Presley? How do we bring them back using AI? The Beatles did it, right? And they won a Grammy for it.
Beatles did it. I just spoke recently this week with Reese Feature, who had a lot of sort of press coverage during this award seasons, because they were used heavily in a number of movies that were made. But they've also worked with estates of music artists to bring their voice back for a number of licensing opportunities, and Elvis Presley being one of them that they were able to help assist and support. All of those tests and sort of larger names, I think, that they have worked with so far, it sounds like it's been very much a heavy hands-on process to get everything just right. It's not something where you're just going to upload a dozen clips and then suddenly magically you've got a Elvis Presley powered singing machine. It's very much a hands-on process. It takes a lot of bodies to get right, and a lot of time to get right. It's sort of it sounds like a days and weeks and sometimes even months process to get the results that you want. So it's, again, something that only a big studio or a big production is taking on right now. But the technology is getting commoditized, and it is coming down to a point where, they even showed off in the conversation I had with them, where they had started working in the medical field with people who create the equipment for vocalizing, the laryngectomy. If you've lost your voice for any reason, they effectively have a way to take that, and instead of sounding like a very tinny robot that we're used to with these types of medical devices, you can have a very natural sounding voice, or you might even have your voice that could power it. And so I think that overlap in the technology, which probably never would have come around on its own without the media industry being there. In other words, they're able to take the learnings out of media from doing work with the states, with others, to get those likenesses and the intonations right, and map it into these other areas and these other technologies.
Well, that's fascinating. Speaking of avatars, that was just about voice and music,
right?
But you can have a digital twin of yourself,
sure,
which is certainly being exploited. I have an avatar. I use it and just feed it a script, and it's me talking, and what the heck, right? I gave it permission.
Right, exactly.
I'm using HeyGen, which I think is an ethically sourced platform. So not all of them are, and they're not going to train on me, but who cares about me, my voice? So I don't care. But what do you think about that future?
I think there's a ton of
possibilities, right?
There's a ton of use cases for it where content would simply never exist because there either wasn't enough time in the day or there was no justification for being able to produce it. I remember when I was at Microsoft, there was a big European broadcaster who had trained voice models of a few of their primary anchors and news reporters. And whereas they had tried to bring them in to record a couple of headlines and sort of the quick hit news items that they could use on their website, the reality was they were never going to be able to do everything. And they certainly weren't going to be able to do it in multiple languages, because often you're wanting to cater to a broader range of languages in the EU to make sure that you're doing something that the viewers can natively watch. But by training the voices, you could now have a producer who was helping put together the articles and the headlines, just create a version that got uploaded to a content management system that would create now an audio file of that presenter reading that news in the same style and intonation that they would have done in a recording. And you haven't had to try to book that experience or bring them in for that time. And you can do multiple takes, or you can do way more content than you would have done before. And again, you might have had a little bit of that content, but you never would have had as much that was available without that AI technology being there in order to do it. Even internally at Microsoft, we would use some of the localization pieces, so that if there's a presentation I give a lot, why don't we just put it into other languages so that the first time you're hearing it natively, so that you're not trying to understand tech and my bad English at the same time.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. So it is empowering. It's amplifying. I think there is a concern of flooding the zone with so much content that people can't even possibly consume it all. Right. And that becomes a problem, but people eventually find voices they want to listen to, and maybe AI can assist with how to navigate finding that, right? Which I think is the next evolution in television and streaming, right?
Very
Is
much
like, how can you make that experience better? Because it sucks right now.
I think I've heard there's going to be too much content argument before, and I feel like there's been a steady growth of content since the broadcast days, through cable, through streaming. There's been a continual sort of fragmentation of the audience, and which then allows you to cater to a more niche group with what you're showing. In an age where you only had 3 or 4 channels, you were never going to be able to get to an anime specific audience or a classic film audience in the same way that you can when there's niche. So I believe that the more content argument is a little hollow, because are we going to try and watch it all? No. Are we going to find the things that we want? Absolutely. And you are 100% right. AI will have to play a role in helping solve that. And frankly, content discovery has been broken since the days of cable TV and TV guides and cable guides being there as a sort of single source of truth of the content that we knew we had access to.
The EPG, the electronic program guide,
My family will literally forget a show that we're watching because we just haven't logged into that app in a week, and we'll go back and it's like, oh, there's 2 more episodes. We totally forgot that it's there because we don't have that nudge or that reminder. And because things lay in a variety of different sort of data silos or entertainment silos. And so I'm continually shocked nobody has tackled sort of the entertainment management and entertainment discoverability in a better way. But somebody's going to do it.
I think it's going to happen with Alexa, because Alexa and Prime, it's all the same company.
I think they will absolutely be a contender in it. I would argue though that Apple and Apple TV is certainly looking to play a role in that space as well. And so I think there will be other independent players that are out there that come to it. It can't just be, like a Google and or search mechanism that we're looking for. We're looking for something that helps us curate that experience.
Yeah. Right. Well, listen, we're getting towards the end of our little show here, and I'd love to hear where you're going to be next and where you're appearing, because you're a busy guy in that way, and you're a very vocal advocate for AI. And so what's your lineup?
I've got a couple things going on. So I'm writing a lot more as you called out. I started a Substack when I left Microsoft, and I'm just writing on the things that sometimes they never let me talk about. Sometimes they would. But I'm having fun doing it. And that's just at abeach.substack.com, abeach.substack.com. I will be at NAB, which starts in about a week. I'll be heading that direction in a week. And then I have a couple of panels, both with SMPTE, Society for Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and one with NAB specifically around DeepSeek and ethical AI and generally talking about content provenance. Other than that, I have a couple of speaking engagements. I'll actually be at Chapman University in April talking to their entertainment law group, and then making plans right now to go to DePaul University in early May because they have an AI and media symposium that their media team is.
Fantastic. Well, keep up the great work, and really appreciated you talking with me today and our audience. And I just want to thank you so much. And we want to have you back as, things progress, certainly. And to all of you who are tuning in, catch more of our Realm IQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms. Please follow and subscribe and smash that subscribe button. You can also follow us on TikTok and LinkedIn and now Blue Sky. Yes, Blue Sky. So thanks so much, Andy. Take care and come back, okay?
Thank you, Kurt. We'll come back anytime.
I want to thank our sponsors Visla, Strikingly, and Speechify. If you would like to sponsor the show, click the link below.
Realm IQ. Transform your business with AI-driven innovation.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology.
KurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.